What's going on, guys? Hyper here, and in today's video we'll be talking about personal loot. More specifically, Blizzard's choice to enforce personal loot and completely remove Master Looter from the game going forward into BFA. In the developer interview this week, Ian Hazacosta stated that since in BFA we don't have tier pieces anymore, you don't have the need to funnel those to specific players, so you don't need Master Looter. And since all the guilds will be using personal loot, this will also cut down on the number of split runs the top end guilds do. You probably already know where I stand on this. Master Looter should not be removed from the game, and it seems to be the general consensus among Mythic Raiders that Master Looter should not be removed from the game, and it will only bring more problems if we introduce personal loot. In this video, I'll just go over all of my ideas that I have about this and why I think Master Looter should stay in the game in one way or another. Master Loot has quite a few benefits. If you're a Mythic Raider, you're probably familiar with the idea of funneling gear. The first few weeks of Mythic, you are trying to funnel gear to your DPS players, most likely, because healers and tanks can get away with having slightly lower eye level and still be able to perform at the Mythic level, because they have tools such as raid cooldowns, and tanks can go a more defensive route and make use of external cooldowns. So in top end guilds, you will see DPS players get geared first, in order to make the DPS checks on later bosses in the raid. Master Loot also allows you to choose who receives the item in your raid whenever it drops from the boss. And this is a freedom that personal loot completely takes away from you. As you might know, Master Looter, you always try to distribute your loot to the person for whom it will numerically be the biggest upgrade. So for example, you have two players in your group. One has a 940 item equipped, the other one has a 950. You kill a boss, a 970 item drops. Numerically, if they're the same class, you will give that item to the person who has a 940, because for them, it will be a bigger upgrade than for the person with the 950. And this just makes sense, because overall, this will help out your group a little bit more. With personal loot, this freedom is completely being taken away. And if you have the same scenario happen, but maybe on the roll of the dice, which what personal loot is pretty much, the person with the higher eye level gets that upgrade. It will still be an upgrade for them, but it won't be as big of an upgrade. And this is looking at it as the best case scenario. The worst case scenario, you have two different classes. For one of them, that item has the worst stats on it. For the other class, it has the best stats on it. And if it drops to the class with whose stats don't match up with the ones they need, then that item is useless for them. Even if it's a 20 eye level upgrade, 30 eye level upgrade, that item might be completely useless. And for the other person, that item would have been a huge upgrade, and they're not able to trade it because they don't have an item that's equivalent or higher eye level in their inventory. With Master Looter, you also have a freedom of choosing who trinkets go to. Even though tier pieces are being removed in BFA, which I overall think is a good decision, trinkets will still play an important role in gearing and the output of classes. So if a trinket drops, it will most likely be a better item for a certain class. Like we see in raids, not the same trinket is not best in slot for every single class. In this last raid, obviously the Pantheon trinket seems to fulfill that role, but every raid previous to Antorus, trinkets varied throughout classes. For some classes, certain trinkets were really good. For other classes, they might not be as good. And with Master Looter, you had the freedom and the option of giving the trinket the class who benefits from it the most. So Master Looter also has a few detriments, but not as many as you might think. The first thing is corruption or favoritism within the loot council. If you're a Mythic Raider or maybe even Heroic, you're probably familiar with RCLC or Big Dumb Loot Council. And these are just systems that allow a raid or a guild to distribute the loot to their raiders. If you have a few people who are maybe really good friends with each other, you might have an officer give that item to his friend, or maybe give it to himself. But this does happen, and I've seen it happen before in some guilds that I've been in. But overall, it's not that big of a deal, and it's probably less of a problem than most people think. And a very easy solution for this is if you can't trust the people you play with in a guild, maybe you shouldn't be playing with them in the first place. The second problem with Master Looter is ninjaing items. And this problem was actually solved back at the end of Warlords of Draenor with the Legion pre-patch, where they made it so 80% of your group has to be from the same guild for you to even be able to put it on personal or a master looter, sorry. And this, in my opinion, was a really good change. Because in Pugs, you don't know who you're playing with, you can't trust the people. Obviously, it's a little bit cynical, but you can't trust the people you're playing with, right? You go into a Pug, if it's a master looter, the raid leader might grab a trinket that he really needs, then just dip out. There's nothing you can do about it. Whenever you're playing with a guild, you should have that trust in your guild mates. And if you don't, like I said before, maybe you shouldn't be playing with them in the first place. Personal loot has quite a few detriments, and most of them I already talked about whenever I mentioned the benefits of Master Looter. Because the benefits of Master Loot are usually the detriments of personal loot. First of all, you don't have the option or the freedom to choose who the PCs go to. Second of all, you can get items with the wrong stats that then you can't trade to people who actually need them as an upgrade. So what does this mean for the raiding scene overall? Ian Azacosta said that this will reduce the number of split runs. I talked with quite a few people about this, and it will reduce it by a little bit, but it will not eliminate split runs completely. There's ways of working around this, and top guilds are already figuring out ways of making this system work in their favor. So split runs, as you know, is where top guilds maybe play 5, 6, 7 alts, and then have like 4 or 5 main characters in each raid, and just fill it up with a bunch of alts, and funnel all the gear from those alts into the main characters. And then for the Mythic raid, they only bring their main characters, which have already had basically weeks of gear funneled into them on the heroic split runs. To work around this with personal loot, you just have armor times split runs. So you have a cloth, a leather, a mail, and a plate. Obviously, you can't have a full cloth run or a full mail run, but you can compose your raid to where like 90% of the players in the raid will be of that armor type. So you can funnel loot to each other, and this will also bring up the importance of Mythic Plus. Before, Mythic Raiders usually only ran a high number of Mythic Pluses on their main character. With split runs, you just had to gear it to kind of a reasonable item level because Heroic is not all that difficult for Mythic Raiders to do. So as long as you're kind of relevant item level, you can just go in there and kill all of the bosses. With personal loot, you will have to spam Mythic pluses on your alts. Why? To get item levels or items that are higher eye level than the ones that you have equipped. Even if they're the wrong stats, even if they're completely useless to you, you'll want to have items in your bag that are very high eye level, so then whenever you get an item from the raid boss, you're able to trade that item that you got to someone that's on their main character. So overall, will this reduce the number of hours that the top guilds will put into split runs and managing all characters for split runs? Probably not. Before, they had to obviously farm some AP. In BFA, that's going to be slightly different, but now they will have to also run Mythic Pluses on their alts. Now, I can't say that exactly this is the system that top guilds will choose to run with. They have some very clever people in there, so they might come around with more efficient ways. But this is the idea that I kind of had for working around the personal loot system of 4 splits. Should Blizzard even control and limit the number of hours that top guilds put into the game to become successful? I don't think they should. If top guilds want to put in 20 hours a day of doing splits, of gearing characters, then let them do it. If they want to run 10 split runs the week before Mythic, let them do it. In pro sports and in every other game where you have the chance of becoming a really good player and reaching a top level, is your gameplay being limited by the developer? Absolutely not. Let's just look at an example such as CSGO, where let's say you have a major coming up and you have to practice for it. Maybe you bootcamp for it in a different country. Is the developer coming in and saying, nah, you're practicing too much for this tournament, you should cut back on it? Absolutely not. Top-end players and professional players make the conscious choice of putting that much time into the game, and they only represent a fraction of a percent of the overall player base. Whenever you join a top guild such as Method or Limit or Easy or whatever top guild you're, or Exorcist, whatever top guild you're going to, you know what you're getting into. It's not like you get in there, then they force you to play 16 hours a day. Even before you sign up, you will know that if you get into that guild, you will have to make the time commitment and put in a bunch of hours every single day to increase your success chance in the upcoming tier. And I don't think Blizzard should interfere with this. This just increases the top end raiding scene and increases competitiveness at the top end. Obviously, whenever we look at split runs, only about the top 10, top 20 guilds in the world do a ridiculous amount of split runs. Everyone else, if you look down to like the top 50, people will do like 2 to 3 split runs. My guild does 2, which I don't think is that big of a number, and it doesn't take so much extra time commitment. If you look below the top 50, people don't tend to run splits at all. Maybe there's 1 or 2 guilds that are below top 50 who do a split run, but overall, people don't run splits. Again, these guilds, the top 100, represents the 1% of the Mythic player base, which is already like a very small fraction of the overall player base. So I don't think Blizzard should be punishing all of the Mythic guilds and all of the guilds who want to use personal loot just because they want to limit the number of hours that the very top end players put into the game. Guys, this sums up my ideas on Master Looter going away and Blizzard enforcing personal loot. If you have any input in this, please leave it in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you guys think. And if you enjoyed the video, as always, make sure to hit the like button and sub to the channel. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Legend Hyperion. Thank you for watching, and I'll hope to see you on the next one.